At this time, I am here to talk about the city service fee, which is on the ballot. Ballots are mailed May 3rd, and the election is May 21st, so it's pretty close. And above all, I want people to be sure to vote and to vote early. Usually 30% of the votes happen in that first week. So before I get started on the particulars of the fee, I just wanted to kind of tell a little story to explain kind of my feeling about this whole city service fee debate and how it involves the city's budgeting. So when I was in my early 20s, which was 40 years ago, I was a tree planter. And as a new tree planter, we had older tree planters, people who had been doing it longer, and we kind of looked to them because when you go out on a unit and you've got 12 people packing trees and planting trees, you've got to kind of strategize your logistics. So you put the experienced planters in the front, and they call back to the planters in the back and tell you when you need to turn back and reverse, so that you are going back and forth over the same territory instead of advancing. And, they knew better, we trusted them, and we were on some pretty rugged territory. Climbing over slash piles and trying to plant trees and rocks and things like that. And it took me a while to figure out that we kept getting reversed over the same rocks and the same slash piles. And at the end of the day, I planted a few hundred trees, and these guys had planted thousands of trees. But, they were the experts, and we trusted them until we figured out, they were on the gravy train. And they were directing us to continue traversing the difficult territory and doing the hard work while they were taking out the gravy, as we used to like to say. And I feel like that's what is going on here. They're taking out the gravy, and they're asking the citizens of the city to traverse back and forth over and over the hard territory. So, as you know, it's $10. It's capped at $10 per month, or $30 per month for businesses. Every household unit will be charged, and every business location. If you are a small business owner or a large business owner who happens to live in the city of Eugene, you're charged twice. If you are, you're $120 and $360 a year. If you happen to be a business owner that has several storefronts, you are charged for all of that. If you are a nonprofit, you are not exempt. If you are a church, you are not exempt. It is permanent. You will hear proponents saying that it expires in 5 years, but the ordinance that will become law if this passes at the ballot says only that the council is required to review it in 5 years. Because it's an ordinance that's voted on by the public, only the public can repeal it or terminate it. So that would require, in order for the city council to terminate this fee, it would require them meeting, deciding they don't want the money, and then putting it out on the ballot for people to vote against it. And I just can't see in any probable universe that you or I live in that is going to happen, because the city has never voluntarily given up a revenue source. As a matter of fact, when I was on council in 2005, because of the pressure from the community to do some repair work on the roads and fill potholes, we increased the gas tax by 2 cents, from 3 cents to 5 cents, and we put an expiration date on it of 2009. I was off council by the time they revisited that, but they just repealed the expiration date, and now it's permanent. And they did that even though we had already drafted and put out and passed a bond measure to city voters to fill potholes. So they kept that source of money as well. So in my opinion, it's a permanent fee. They also are saying that they have the ability not to charge as much as is the cap. So instead of charging each household $10, they're saying, well, we might charge $5. That is up to each particular council. So even if this current council is very responsible to the voters and decides we're only going to charge $5 per household and $20 per business, any future council can change it, and they can change it just by a majority vote of council. And those decisions will be made embedded in the budget process. My experience is there really isn't a whole lot of scrutiny of the budget going on by the city council, and that is one of the problems that is revealed by this particular measure. So a lot of what they are talking about are the services that are threatening to cut. So there's a long list of services: specific police, fire services, Fire Station 2 for police investigators, some important social services like the Cahoots van, which provides a lot of support to the police department, Sheldon Pool, they're going to close some branch libraries, cut some library hours, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the services that are on the chopping block. So the ordinance that becomes law basically says, actually not the ordinance, those services are not in the ordinance. Those specific services with the funding levels attached to them are not mentioned in the ordinance. They're in a resolution that preceded the ordinance. And the resolution says if there's extra revenue, meaning if the fee passes, the proposed fiscal year 14 budget will include funding for those services. And then it lists those services. So even if people pass the regressive flat permanent fee, because they care about these services are only proposed to be funded for 1 year. After that, the real document that governs the fee, the ordinance, which will become law, is the only thing that matters. And this ordinance generalizes what the fee can be spent on, so that any council or any budget committee making a recommendation to the council after 2014 can reassign those revenues to other purposes. Now the purposes have to fall between what the definition is in the ordinance, but that definition is purposely broad and all-encompassing. So basically, in my opinion, that fee can be spent on anything in the city budget. And they don't have to go very far to justify it, because, so you've got this separate fund with what will be $14.4 million, I'll explain that later, in it. And because the ordinance calls out police, fire services, libraries, pools, quality of life services, or reserves, so they can take all the money, all the new revenue, and fund the police department with it. And they're completely consistent with this ordinance. And then they can take the money that's sitting in the general fund that was supposed to be used for police department services and spend it on whatever they want. And they're already draining the general fund of money that should fund those services and using it for padding reserves, and also they plan to build City Hall. But before I get to City Hall, I want to talk a little bit about $14.4 million. So this is every household unit and every business in the city of Eugene. And according to the 2010 census, that's approximately 70,000 household units and approximately 16,500 businesses, which means as of 2010, the capacity of revenue that they can raise with this fee is $14.4 million to fund what they are calling a $6 million budget gap. So when I bring that up, the proponents and the mayor are saying, oh, but we intend to set the fee at a lower level so we won't be collecting all of that money. And I say, I've got a bridge for sale. So the other problem with this definition is it allows the city to stockpile that money and put it in reserves and not even spend it on services. So, so those are some of the problems with the ordinance. One of the things that we've discovered, researching budgets and things, and looking for where the money is going, is that in 2001, when I was on council, we established a fund to save money to build a new city hall, knowing that eventually we needed to build a new city hall. And to fund that fund, we decided to forego upgrades to the existing city hall. And that money for maintenance and upgrades and things like that, we'd fix holes in the roof, but we weren't going to re-roof. So they weren't going to revamp all the electrical or the HVAC or anything like that. That money went into this fund. So that fund was established to build a new city hall, and the theory, which was supported by my colleagues and which I supported and actually forwarded this theory, if we save $20 million for City Hall, then we can go out and ask the voters for another $20 million. So we spend 10 years and we save some money, and then we can make the case to the voters that we need a new City Hall, and we've done due diligence by saving this money. And that was the theory, and everybody agreed to it, and we created the fund. So since 2001, there has been $40 million funneled into that fund. All of it funding that is eligible to be spent on general fund services. So as of last year's budget, $38 million of that had been spent. And there's no city hall. And there's another existing fund that now has, at the beginning of this fiscal year, had $7.5 million in it for City Hall. And in December, while they were contemplating going out for more revenue, they took $1.5 million out of the general fund and put it into the fund for City Hall, so that's $9 million. The mayor and the city manager have said they want City Hall built in 2.5 years, and they have identified some of the money, that's the $9 million that they've drained most recently, off the general fund, but they don't know where they're going to get the remainder of the money to build City Hall, even though they're moving forward for completion in 2014, and I say this is where they